everyone, I'm Elaine Chow.
And I'm Trist Curlis.
And welcome to the Musician's Loop.
Loop, like a drum loop?
No, like the kind of thing that a jeweler uses to evaluate gems.
Oh, like a magnifying glass, like what we'll do on this podcast, actively listening to music like a musician.
That's right. And every week, we are choosing a track to dive into together and share our thoughts about what we find intriguing about the song.
Whether it's songwriting, chord progression, instrumentation, recording technology, arrangement, whatever, we're looking at the music we love through the lens, or the loop, of decades in the music industry.
Hey, Trist, what do we have this week?
Elaine, this week we have, finally, Michael Jackson.
Ooh, oh
right.
Yeah.
Michael Jackson, inevitable that we would cover a Michael Jackson song.
Of course.
And there may be other Michael Jackson songs that employ this technique, but this song employs a technique that's from the 13th, 14th century choral music.
Okay.
Called Hocket.
Okay, I have never heard of this.
Perfect. This is what I was going for. So, Michael Jackson with the technique of Hocket. Ooh, I can hear people sharing right now and not turning off the podcast at all. They're so excited to hear what this is.
Okay, so tell me what Hocket is.
Well, this song is Workin Day and Night.
Okay.
And, well, we'll just save it. You want to listen to the song? We'll talk about it after people give a listen.
Okay, so we're going to put the links in the show notes for you to listen to, and we're going to pause in just a moment. But before we do, Tris, can you, especially for our new listeners, tell us how we should be listening to music?
Well, especially for this one, so many moving parts. It's such a thick arrangement. It's really great to get as many details as you can and get yourself in the best listening environment. Make no mistake, we're thrilled that you're joining us in any capacity. If your podcast time is out on a walk and you just got your AirPods on, great. We're glad to have you. If it's in the car and your car stereo is terrible, great. We're glad to have you. But if you do have the opportunity to improve your listening environment, you can grab the nicer headphones. You can go to your listening room in your cave, whatever it is. If you can improve, why not take the chance to do it? I don't think in our lives these days we take enough chances to stop and just improve our quality of listening.
Awesome. So with that, we're going to pause for a moment and we'll be right back. All right, and we are back.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Okay. This was actually not one that I had heard before this time around.
Really?
Yeah. Growing up with Michael Jackson, you hear a lot of Thriller, Billie Jean. There's a whole bunch of the classics that played on the radio all the time. But I really did not get that much into Michael Jackson's entire discography while growing up.
Wow, yeah. It is interesting. I think me and a lot of my friends that were into that, we had the full albums and listened to Off the Wall and Thriller all the way through over and over and over that I actually forget that some of these songs that to me are so, like, there were literal hits and singles that were released from those albums, but because there were so many and I didn't just own the singles, I had the albums, listened to them all, so I don't think of them. But yeah, you're right. This was not released as a single. It was actually a B-side to some other released singles. So that does make sense. I have to get out of my own little world of me and my musician friends who always listen to all of this stuff.
Yeah. And, I'm getting to be one of those people as well in terms of listening to entire albums. That is something that, especially nowadays when we're so algorithm driven, it is really challenging to listen to things that are a part of a broader album.
Right.
Well, I'm really curious about this whole thing that you mentioned right before the break, which was Hocket. I'm really curious now.
So the place where the concept of a Hocket comes into play are those nice extended brass sections, those horn sections. So when you just, as a casual listen, you hear what you hear, and you hear like a little melody and a rhythm of what the horn parts are. Turns out that those sections have two different recordings happening simultaneously. So where you have two or more lines happening independently of one another,
Okay.
but when you listen to the final product altogether, the end result is you only hear one line of melody, even though it's been displaced into different parts.
Oh, interesting. Okay. So our
So two, three,
brains.
or four voices, yeah, you end up going, oh, the melody is da 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 da, whatever. This is the melody, but then you
Mhm.
find out, oh, this one person when he's saying da 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 da, and the other person saying da 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 da. You alternate the parts, but the end result sounds like just one continuous line.
Ah, interesting. Yeah, I've heard this technique in lots of a cappella and
Mm-hmm.
choral pieces before, so I get what you're talking about now in terms of what our brains interpret as a melody.
Right. So
Awesome.
that I'm gonna sing it wrong, but like that whole middle section where it's like my brain is thinking what that whole section is. And there's a really great video we will also put in the show notes that you should check out. And it plays the example all together. Then it plays the example again, and it takes out one of the two horn parts, isolated. And so you can hear just one of the rhythms. And when you hear it separately, you're like, oh, totally. Like it makes perfect sense when you hear it apart. But having not heard it apart before, I never would have picked it out because it's mixed so well together and written so well, again, as Hocket should. So
Yeah, I'm kind of curious, as an arranger, why would you choose to use this technique versus doing the melodic line all together in a single set of instruments or a single set of voices?
Jerry Hay is the great arranger of all of these Michael Jackson horns that you think of in this era, and the Sea Wind horns. That's a group of players, like 90% the same guys all the time
Hmm.
on literally hundreds of albums that we've all heard and hit songs. That's all I can think of is why you would do it. It's just because you want these rhythms that are actually maybe more difficult to play. I'm not sure. I'm going to investigate that a little bit, see if I can find some Jerry Hay interviews. Maybe someone asks him about that.
Yeah, I think that that was exactly where my mind went. And the reason I say that is a lot of times in a cappella, when you're doing that kind of thing, it's because otherwise the jump is really, really challenging for
Mm-hmm.
a voice to do, especially if you're talking about a jump that's more than a fifth or it jumps, between two different registers. It is one of
Right.
those things where you can keep some of the singers in one register and some of the other singers in other registers. And that is one thing that you can play around with to at least take advantage of where your break is, etc.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think in those instances you're talking about, especially when you're arranging for a certain amount of voices a cappella, sometimes you're doing things like that, not just to be creative or to be interesting, but out of necessity. Like, oh, this part spans a huge range. So sometimes out of necessity rather than just choice. Yeah.
Exactly.
I also want to investigate if he'd implored that any other places. I will say I've heard this similar kind of thing ever since we dug into this, and I noticed that that was the case. So that's been interesting to realize.
Now, one of the things I was thinking about as I was listening to this is where this fits into Michael Jackson's entire discography, but also within what was popular during that time. Now, I seem to remember this came out in the early 80s, right?
I think 1980.
1980. Yeah. So we're thinking about the late 1970s and Tower of Power, a lot of the very brass and funk type of influence that we
Mm-hmm.
have into the early 1980s. And the reason I mention this is by the time we're hitting the late 1980s, early 1990s, there's a lot more synth and a lot less brass in Michael Jackson's work, at least what was released as singles. Is that what you
Yeah,
heard
this
as
is
well?
one of the main reasons I like this album the most. Obviously, Thriller is an undeniable smash worldwide, generationally. Everyone knows, loves it, had the bigger hits. But this precursor, I think a lot of my friends agree with me. We're like, oh, yeah, that's really cool. Man, Off the Wall has so much good stuff. And I think I like the lack of technology. There's some technology that didn't exist yet.
Hmm.
And it was a little bit the case for Thriller, but even Thriller, there's a little bit more synthesizer stuff like, oh, this is a brand new thing we're going to try out.
Hmm.
Um, And there's nothing wrong with that. Musicians have always been like that. Oh, here's this new toy, new sounds that we haven't heard before. We're always seeking to create and try new things, which is cool. And also with sequencing on some of this stuff, all the percussion and stuff that happens,
Mhm.
like try to recreate this track now. And because of how much time and money it costs to be in a studio or just time that it takes to do whatever, on these, there's someone banging on a glass bottle for 5 minutes.
Mhm.
They're grooving. Instead of like, hey, give me about 5 minutes and I'm going to push all the buttons on this rhythm machine and I'm going to program it and then it's going to be done and we can just press play and then we can get on to the rest of it. It's like, no, there are real humans in there grooving on every little element, not just like the horn parts and the guitar part. So back to you're talking about the technology. Yeah, I like that about this. I like that you wouldn't really use synth horns. You have real horns and you wouldn't have just programmed shakers and percussion. Man, no one makes records like this anymore. It just costs so much more money to do all of this when you can kind of get what you're going for and still have a big record sound like you want. But man, I love this old way of doing it.
Well, one of the things that is very different about when you're talking about doing real live brass, is just how loud it is. I'm just thinking about some of these all brass environments that you're in, whether it's like New Orleans jazz, or there's this one group that I was watching on YouTube where it's like 10 brass players in the New York subway, and that's just a wall of sound, right? Because brass is just
Yeah.
so loud. Or you go to a jazz club or some of the Latin music that you hear that is very, very brass heavy. There is such volume that's involved with that, and it's so thrilling, right? You hear a group like Tower of Power, and you're like, "Oh my goodness, I am blown away just by the sheer volume
Right,
of the brass."
you feel the energy when you're in the same space with it more than you can,
Exactly.
even if it's really perfect, amazing samples of it. Just doesn't have the energy. The literal SPLs, the sound pressure levels of the air moving through the club isn't the same.
Exactly. So that actually leads me to another question that I had. There were definitely elements in the breakdown where I heard drums, like more hand drums as opposed to a kit drum. And that was an interesting choice that I thought. Everything else was like, oh, you could see this in a funk band. Any thoughts about the
Yeah,
choice there?
all of the percussion through the whole thing. Michael Jackson, throughout all of his recorded history, always had his kind of heavy vocal breathing and vocal percussive kind of things that he'd always do. His very unique to him kind of sounds at the entrance. There was always like little breaths and vocal percussion-y kinds of things.
Yeah,
He would do that a lot, and throughout they're kind of there blended in some other places, but some places things get stripped away and you can hear that he's doing that, and that's really through a lot of his catalog and these kinds of funky groovy tunes. But yeah, choosing just some different, hey, on this breakdown, we'll just use these bongos or these congas or these other, like you say, hand drums or whatever. But I understand from just these productions, Quincy Jones productions are always like that. He's a consummate musician and always thinking of interesting colors and textures to keep things alive and varied. I think the essence here with Michael Jackson, especially on any of these funky groove tunes, obviously not some of the ballads and things, but if you see any video of him or ever when he's ever talking about the music, or if you see some of the documentaries where he's in rehearsal and he's conveying to the band what he wants, he's never talking technically. He's
hmm
always just explaining. No, right there. He's like always just giving a
yeah,
feel. It's so in him. Another thing that I'll add in the show notes, you can hear on one of the reissues of the CD Off the Wall, there is a demo of this song, Workin Day and Night, where just at their house on a tape recorder, him and his brothers and Janet Jackson too. So he already had this idea of how the whole thing should feel. He could play that for Quincy Jones, and Quincy Jones, okay, got it. I think at some point before I knew more of the backstory and hearing some of the origin stories of some of these things that came from Michael's head, I think in my brain, I went the path of, Quincy Jones, musical genius. Those albums are mostly great because of him. And Michael was super talented and he was able to harness him and do all these amazing things. And I think it's a little more even or even more slated to like, no, Michael had all these ideas. It's not like he had like a little bit of a song idea and then Quincy made it happen. It was a little more Michael just really knew what he wanted and really had an idea. And then, Quincy again had the connections and the musical understanding of who to hire, who to bring in, what instruments to use in what places, where to mix them between him and the engineers. So I think it's more of a effort of just getting Michael's essence into every track because it was just in him.
Yeah, it's fascinating to think about the relationship between the producer and the artist, especially when it comes to something as iconic as this album. I wanted to switch gears a little bit because we were talking about recording technology in a previous episode. And one of the things that I noticed about this is that for whatever reason, it was a much longer song than your typical pop song. It's over 5 minutes right here. And I actually timed some of the breakdowns because they were extremely long.
Right.
So there are two instrumental breakdowns in this. That was almost 45 seconds the first time, which is
Yep.
forever
Yeah.
in a track from this era. And then later on, the second breakdown, that was almost 30 seconds. So we're
Yeah.
talking about a minute and 15 seconds out of this is just instruments.
Right.
No Michael Jackson. It's just the breakdown, which I'm sure was absolutely amazing because it's like your dance breakdown here. And
Sure.
I could also see where in a live performance, it would go much, much longer because now you have these two spaces to really lean in. But going back to the whole concept of we're talking about, the vinyl that you're pressing down, how do you rationalize like the length of this with the time that we have and the technology that was available?
Well, I think this circles back to where we started is like, well, this is probably a little bit of an answer to why this one wasn't a single. Because even if you did, you would have to try to edit this down if you were to release it as a single. And maybe there were edits of it. Maybe that doesn't have anything to do with it. But as is, yeah, it's pretty long. Even though it's not this exact thing, I'll say something that's very different from songwriting today, or really even the last 10 or 20 years, is what I like to call the late third verse. So many times in basic great songs, intro, verse, pre-chorus, chorus, verse, chorus, and then if maybe a bridge, and then chorus, 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 chorus out.
Right.
And a lot of times I'll forget because I get so into that's the way that so many songs are that I go back and listen to some of these Michael Jackson tunes on both of these albums, Off the Wall and Thriller. And right about the time you're through the second chorus or you're thinking, oh, it's just going to repeat the chorus and fade out, it's like, bam, there's another verse. It's like, whoa, I forgot that you could do that. I'm not accustomed to hearing that. There's a verse again that happens after a whole bunch of sections where you kind of think we're kind of toward the end and nope, I'm going to put another verse in here.
Since we're talking about the lyrics, as I was taking a look at the lyrics, because of course I was reading through it like a poem and trying to figure out what does this mean, some of the things that I go through when I'm looking at it is, all right, who is a narrator? Who's a narrator talking to? And what is the nature of what they're talking about? And so in this case, it was like, okay, we have this character who is talking to his honey, and she has certain expectations of him, and the song is a response to that. So it was an interesting read through as I was looking at the lyrics and trying to figure out, well, what does the song really mean and what is he really talking about? And also, like, how does that fit in with the sound and the feel of this particular piece?
I had this epiphany as you were saying this. It hit me. Wow. For me personally, and maybe some of the listeners can relate to this, this kind of song, like until you just said those things, I have never in my hundreds of listens to this ever considered what the lyrics are. Not one time. You just made me realize it's even about a relationship or him talking to somebody. I didn't even consider it. I'm just like, do you hear how cool that horn part is? They did two different parts. That's so cool. And as you listen to this podcast, you might notice as we go song to song, songs that are like this, I'm almost always going to be geeking out about how great the drummer is or how cool it all works together or what the pocket is. So thank you, Elaine. That's why there's two of us, not just me doing this.
Yeah, I will 100% say that I am with you on the temptation just to listen to the music and not to the words, which is exactly why I wrote down all of the words or like found it online and tried to figure out what it meant.
Awesome.
And, maybe this is a challenge for those of us who are much more on the production side or much more on the performance side, that we actually stop and look at the things that we are singing or listening to. It
Yeah. I think the first time I ever truly paid attention to lyrics in songs was the first time I ever wrote lyrics to a song myself. Like within that year, I finally, quote unquote, heard lyrics to songs that I had heard over years and years and years. I'm like, oh, that's what that song's about, because I had to create that on my own. I finally heard that, Little Red Corvette isn't about a car.
Yeah. And I think that that's part of the reason why different people hear different things in songs or enjoy songs in a slightly different way. And I think you and I are wired in very particular ways. I've been playing piano since I was 6. And so I'm much more about the musical structure and all that things. And I'm not listening to the lyrics as well. And I also just can't pick out words that well.
Right.
So as I'm looking at them, I have to force myself to stop and look at them in order to be able to appreciate the song for its totality.
I'm really glad you mentioned those, because actually now that I think about them, it does really work. They're not just throwaways. It really is the vibe of this. The energy of it is like, man, I'm working day and night to keep you, etc. So it kind of fits the vibe of the tune, of all the things that I love about it. So that's cool. But I had never really even considered what the lyrics were until you just said that. So,
well, maybe this is a challenge for both of us in the future.
Sounds great. Very cool.
All right. So any last thoughts before we move on to our next section?
No, man, it's great. I highly recommend, and I do this once a year. I just get my good headphones. I listen to all of Off the Wall. The Off the Wall album is just a sonic masterpiece, I think, between his vibe and his energy and the songwriting and the production. And almost every time I hear a string line I never heard before, or Michael will vocally like double a guitar part, there'll always be things that I didn't realize were there before. And it's a challenge these days with all of our attention so short, it seems these days. It's a challenge to just sit, and not while you're watching a show, not while you're cleaning, not while you're reading, not while you're checking your emails, but literally only listening. Just put on some headphones and listen to this entire album. And man, it's amazing. It's like my favorite listen.
It's interesting to think about this, like you said, from a discipline perspective and thinking about how we're training our brains. And so, as we're taking this opportunity to listen to these songs, I think as a part of the practice, we are training our brains to be more focused, to be more aware of what's happening in the moment. So, thank you very much for your reminder.
Absolutely.
All right. And with that, we are moving to our next segment, which is
mailbag.
Yes, the mailbag. And if you have any questions for us, please feel free to reach out to us on Instagram or on Threads. We are at The Musicians Loop, LOUPE, or you can email us at themusiciansloop@gmail.com. So this week's mailbag comes from Threads, and it is from Steph Fleur, who is an artist based out of Borneo, which is an island in Malaysia. And she writes, I don't think I could leave my corporate job to pursue a full career in music. Not because I'm not passionate, but my corporate salary is used to ang pao the musicians that help me realize my projects. At the end of the day, my corporate salary funds my musicians. Without it, I would be journeying this music path a little lonelier. And the phrase that she used in there, I had to look up. Ang pao in Malaysian is the equivalent to the Chinese hong bao, which is the red envelope. So it is slang to mean to pay. So it looks like Steph uses her corporate salary to pay instrumentalists or pay band members so that she can continue to make her music. And so she sees it as like a source of income to help her to build her community.
Right.
So, that leads me to the question of, what do you think the role is that musicians with day jobs or corporate jobs can have in the larger music industry?
Oh, man. I think the way that those things work together, usually starts with what the end goal is. So for this musician, she's saying, I need this day job to fund the music thing that I do. I could be perceiving this incorrectly, and every situation is unique, of course, but that sounds to me like she doesn't have the goal of being a career full-time musician, because then the time that she spends making the money to do it wouldn't be there. Or she doesn't want to tour. You see what I'm saying? And none of their judgment in any direction. It's like, oh, well, yeah, my goal is that I want to keep music in my life. That costs a lot to do all of those things. So my job that I normally have might help pay for that. Then that's a little more symbiotic. Now, if, okay, my goal is I want to tour the world. I want to be touring 3/4 of the year. I want to go to lots of different countries, and I want to go all around my country, and I want to take a band with me, and I'm going to record an album every year and a half. Like, those goals don't fit with, oh, so I'm going to do that, and to pay for it, I have this corporate job. Like, those don't match up because you don't have the time to go do all those. Well, I say don't. Try not to be absolutes. I suppose you could have some kind of corporate job where you traveled and could be online the few other moments you're awake not trying to do music. It depends on what you have the time for. Sometimes I think people try to do that. They try to have a particular goal, but then the way that they go about it isn't symbiotic with their goal. It doesn't match.
Yeah, I think I have a slightly different perspective on that. Part of the reason I say this is that you and I both know musicians who have been full time, but they've also had corporate jobs. And the reason why they've done that is because it's just pragmatic. I happen to live in the San Francisco Bay Area. Oh man, it's like expensive to live here. And so the people who have lived in San Francisco and tried to make a living out of their art have had to take other jobs in order to be able to supplement it. So I think that there's maybe more of a spectrum in there of what the intent of the corporate job is. And part of the reason I brought this up is that even if you're going to be super serious about your work, there is a transition point, right? I think about people who have side hustles, side gigs of all sorts of types, whether it's in art or consulting or whatever types of things. They generally will work a job while they are standing up their second work, right? Their
Mm-hmm.
second job, and thinking about, okay, at what point in time does it shift gears into the other thing is going to be my primary thing? And then, the corporate thing
Right.
might be a side thing.
Right.
And, one of the challenges with music in particular is that it is very challenging to make it a sustainable living. And I think you and I both know this, where there's a lot of people who are unwilling to pay for music. And it's like, oh, let's just do things for exposure. And at a certain point in time, you just have to eat. And so I think that there is something to be said about, hey, I'm going to make music and make high quality music, and I'm going to feed into the industry because I will continue to make money and hire musicians so that we are continuing this environment of like people should be paid for their music. And I would love to hear more people who are doing that, like working their corporate jobs and actively making music as well, just so that we have more space for the people who want to make it full time.
I, and to me, that's all different. Again, with the if the goal would still be the full time thing, yeah, you could have the corporate job for a while you're building up to that. So when I co-founded my a cappella group, Impact in 1995. Yeah, when we started, it wasn't like, okay, we're full time musicians. You didn't just start that. All of us had full time jobs, and then it was slowly going away from them. That sounds different from what this is. This is like, I have this corporate job. I couldn't leave it to pursue a career in music, is
Hmm.
what she was saying. So
Yeah.
that's just, and again, that's what works for the level of participation in music that she wants. Like, they're commensurate, they work together. So it's not that you couldn't have this and have that goal. It's just that obtaining that goal includes getting rid of the job you got that sustained you while you were on your way there. Right.
Okay, I could see that. I'm also, and I think going back to the original conversation that you and I had, as we're thinking about what should the end goal be, I think we have to go back to value statements about, like, is it sufficient to live this life where you are an excellent musician and working a corporate job? But I think that there is maybe a false equivalence that a lot of people have, that if you don't leave your corporate job and pursue music, you must be less passionate or less
Oh,
qualified or
right.
less good about that. And I
Right.
think that that's something that I do want to make sure that everyone pressure tests, because there are a lot of talented people out there who we both know who are just excellent musicians and they're working day jobs. And sometimes it's pragmatic and sometimes they want that level of stability. I don't know what it is, but I just want to reinforce that we don't necessarily need to think that full time means that you're awesome, and that that should be the goal that everyone should be pursuing.
Totally true. Yeah, it's absolutely unique to everyone. Everyone has different needs for the way that their life goes, their relationships, their families, what fits into what their goals are. It's important just at least have those, again, be where they can function together, not have unrealistic goal and then way of achieving it. That's all that I hear there. So to me, again, I hear that this musician you talked about, it sounds to me like she's content with that. It sounds like she likes the balance of it. And some people will work better that way. And sometimes maybe their musicianship is better because they're more balanced and they don't feel like their whole life is hanging on whether this next thing they do is successful or not, etc. Who knows?
Yeah. So, any last thoughts about this before we move on, Trist?
I think that's it. Another great question, Elaine.
Awesome. Well, with that, we're going to wrap up for this week.
Yeah, let us know what you think about this tune and maybe, when you first heard it or what you thought about it or what your favorite Michael Jackson funky tune is. Stuff like that. Let us know.
All right. And with that, see you next time.
Bye. Is that making sense?
No, can you describe it again?
I sound old man get off my lawn ish when I do this.
Let me try that again.
This episode, by the way, should be called Hocket and Pocket. I just decided.
Before we do that, I got to pour myself some more tea.
Man, forever ago.